Hey everyone, and welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. Today, Drew, Tate, and we share a pretty unique approach to goal setting and New Year's resolutions. Maybe you're like me and have found that traditional goal setting just doesn't sit quite right with you. Well, if that's the case, we share a fresh approach today that is sure to help. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. Excited to do a special New Year's episode with Drew and Tate today. And this may shift your approach to the new year. So if you haven't got that new gym membership yet or written down all 15 of your goals for the year, don't yet. Listen to this first and see if it shifts your approach. And our hope is that we can help create some space and freedom for you to really focus on what you want and to set your goals in a way that works for you. Okay. So a lot of times there's like this, obviously this whole stigma around at the new year, we set goals. And then for a lot of us, I think the research says like over 90% of people, most of their goals are like they've let go of them within 3 weeks. And that's just wild. Like, why does that happen? Right. And I really believe that one of the reasons why that happens is because we start setting goals from a place of shame or comparison, and we're committing to things that we don't actually really choose. Mm-hmm. We think we should be choosing them, or we think someone else thinks we should be choosing them. And so that's like one of the first places to start is recognize that you don't have to set any specific goal. Like, you don't even have to set goals. Okay. Maybe just sit with that for a minute and recognize that you don't have to set goals in January. A couple years ago, I decided that I'd be more intentional about that. And so it's funny to look back. Like, I started going to the gym consistently in October and not in January and kind of on purpose. Anyway, so just want to introduce you to that there's nothing that you have to do or that you should be doing. So consider that. Ask yourself, like, what do I really want? And then go back and ask yourself, like, okay, why do I want that? And what kind of person would I be if I was doing that, or if I was achieving that, whatever that goal is for you? So I know this is a little bit different, and would love to get your thoughts, Tate and Drew, on how this has looked for you when it comes to goals, because this is a big thing. And I just think that in general, a lot of stuff out there about goals doesn't work for a lot of people. Otherwise, we'd have a way higher percentage of people reaching their goals beyond 3 weeks, or sticking with them beyond 3 weeks.
Yeah. So some of you might be thinking, what, like Matt just told me, don't set any goals. Like, this is inspiring.
Yeah.
And no, I think that's such good advice and good wisdom. First off, Matt, and if you're listening to our listener, like, if you are going to set a goal, like, choose it because you want it. Don't do it because you feel like, well, Mom and Dad always had us at New Year's write out our list of 20 goals for the year.
Well, my wife thinks I need to lose 10 pounds.
Right. So I'll write that down because that's what someone else wants me to do. Right. So no, I think it's awesome that you don't have to. And also at the same time, who are you becoming? Who are you right now? Like, what is it you want? And operate out of that space.
Yeah, even just a shift in the way you use the term goals, if you want to use it that. But people, let's say, like Drew just said, your wife thinks you need to lose 10 pounds. So somebody sets the goal of, I want to lose 10 pounds. I think it's way easier to fall short on something like that versus telling yourself, I want to be a healthy person. And when you can make that shift and saying, I want to be a healthy person, I want to live healthy, you're making more of a mental shift in your whole approach to not just the gym and losing weight, but everything that's associated around it. And it doesn't give you that single target on how you're going to do it, or, that you have to do X, Y, Z. All you're telling yourself is, I want to be healthy. And you'll start making those incremental things, and maybe that'll change and shift over time. And that's all okay. That's perfect.
Yeah. It is so powerful to like ask yourself, okay, well, who do I want to be, or who am I becoming in regards to this? And I get that some of you may be like, all right, so I'm supposed to just tell myself I'm a healthy person and then like see what happens. And there's more to it than that. And so I actually would love, Drew, for you to share your experience around this. So for those of you who don't know, Drew lost eventually 100 pounds and was able to make the shift. And he talks about a big reason is because he chose to be a healthy, active, and strong. And so, Drew, help us understand a little bit about how you can kind of focus on who you're being and becoming and have it translate into actual results.
Yeah. First off, I think being and doing are closely related. I don't think you can just be and that's enough. And I don't think you can just do and that's enough. Like, if you're going to be something, it'll naturally cause you to do things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise. And if you do things long enough, I think that can help you become something as well. So I think there's a correlation there. I guess like this journey, like my health journey, I guess you might say, it was over the space of several years. And it started with just a realization that, like, man, it hurt. Like, I had plantar fasciitis really bad. I knew I was overweight. I didn't have energy to play with my kids. My feet hurt when I got out of bed in the morning. And honestly, it started by doing simple things. I think if I had set a goal 4 years ago that I'm going to lose 50 pounds, I'm going to lose 100 pounds, I don't think it would have happened. I would have failed. So what was really interesting is it all started with my brother losing a lot of weight. Really, he was a leader to me in a sense that I saw him do it and I was like, oh, well, if he can do it, like that's maybe a theme with my brothers. Maybe I have something unhealthy when my younger brothers do something. I'm like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. That's that like older brother. I don't know if there's probably some term for that. Anyways, so my brother went on this diet, which is kind of extreme, called the carnivore diet. Basically cut out everything but animal products. And I liked the idea of it because it was really simple. I'm like, well, one, I love eggs, bacon, beef. I hate cooking and having to prep something. So it just was a really simple idea. And I think just me telling myself, hey, I think I can do that, and just implementing one thing into my life. I didn't start working out. I didn't start going to the gym. I didn't start running. I didn't start doing all of those things. I just changed how I was eating. It was really successful. Lost a bunch of weight. I probably lost 50 pounds in 6 months. Went from 265 down to probably about 60 pounds, actually, probably around 205. Then started experimenting with keto. Then I kind of just fell off of that. But another thing that was really important is I had a friend invite me to the gym somewhere in that time, my buddy Jake Hansen, and he started dragging me out of the bed in the mornings to go with him to the gym. We don't even work out together anymore, but it just created another habit in my life. Like, I just decided, hey, I want to be back in the gym. It's always depressing when you first go back after years. Like, I feel like I couldn't even bench a bar. And you try to do what you used to do in college. It's like, oh man, this is embarrassing. So just, I started adding that into my life. And then once again, I gained a little bit of weight, probably got back up to 235, and just made the decision, hey, I want to do better, and got this crazy dream to get a six pack. And so it's like this progressed over time. It was like one thing after another. Like, and then to your point, Matt, I eventually decided to have an identity that I'm someone who's healthy, fit, active, and strong. It's funny. I use Fitbit. You go back and look at my steps. When I started telling myself that, I went from 6,000 steps a day. I've been averaging over 10,000 steps a day since. And I think that just came out of that mindset. And so it's just been one little thing after another. I ended up hiring a physical trainer earlier this year. He helped me really get my nutrition dialed in, my macros, my protein. Realized I was eating way too little protein. And I feel like I'm rambling at this point, so I want to wrap it up. I think it was like living out of that desire to be healthy, which helped me get to where I am. Now I'm actually trying to add some weight back on. And like, I don't think I would have done it if I tried to do it all at once. Like, I think just making little changes in my life and just focusing on being healthier really has helped me. And then things have stacked and progressed over time, where it's been like, oh, I want to add something new to my routine, or now I'm going to add a little more cardio, or now I'm going to, now I'm actually cooking meals for myself, which is kind of crazy. So,
yeah. Well, I do think that one of the biggest things in there, you said it at the beginning and the end, is that if you would have said at 265 pounds, my goal is to lose 100 pounds, this year or in the next 18 months, there's a good chance you would have been burnt out on that. And that's what happens, is that a lot of times when we look at this most like ideal outcome and we get attached to it, then if it looks like it's not going to happen, then we just give up altogether. And I think that that's what a lot of us experience when it comes to goals. And so a ton of good insight there to look at what you want and then start with something that you feel like is truly achievable to you. Find yourself an accountability partner, right? Like everything you mentioned had one. Your brother, Jake, the coach, like find yourself an accountability partner with something that feels achievable to you. And yeah, don't get hung up on attaching to this ideal outcome, which will likely result in being burnt out after a short amount of time when it
say one more thing. I love one thing that's really shifted my mindset is, and I think this might be, I don't know if this is for all Christianity, but at least in your and my faith, Matt, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I've always had this feeling that there's so many people that feel shame because they aren't perfect. And in the Gospel of Matthew, in the Sermon on the Mount, Christ said, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." I've got it pulled up, the Greek translation of that same word. I don't know what the actual word is, but another translation of that word perfect is complete, finished, or fully developed. And that changes that idea of perfection so much. Like, what if I don't have to be perfect? What if I just am striving to be complete, or striving to be fully developed, or just striving to finish something? And so I think also, just like, let's go back to my health, like realizing, hey, if there's a day where I don't hit my macros perfectly and I'm traveling and I eat junk food for a day, it's not the end of the world. Like, it's easy to feel like, oh, I wasn't perfect, give up on this whole goal. No, it's like, let's get back on track tomorrow. It's the direction I'm going more so than it is being perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this conversation, and I'm kind of putting all this together as we're talking, honestly. And it's, whether it's through schooling or your career or everything else, everybody talks about, there's things out there like SMART goals and everything else. And they try to drill it down to where it's just so like black and white. And I get it. And I see value in that at times. And I don't want to confuse that with what we're talking about today, because the types of things I feel like we're talking about are real life changes and almost more identity based, and helping people develop more of who they want to be. What do you want out of life? Not specifically a target like I want to graduate, or I want to pass this test, or I want to be 150 pounds, or whatever those are. I think those can be secondary along that journey of once you determine kind of your path and focal point and identity in a way. Because I do see value in some of those targets, like, studying for a test or something. It's like, man, if I don't just schedule this test, I'm going to keep putting it off because I don't ever feel ready. But if I schedule the test on the 12th, I'm going to be ready. And so I think there's time and a place for those.
Right. Yeah.
And I also don't think that that's necessarily what we're talking about today.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an and, Tate. So like Drew shared the example and the test example exactly the same. So there's a difference between never setting an objective and just like floundering through life. Okay. That's not powerful. And then also having an objective that you're so attached to that if you don't get 100 on the test or you don't get your macros every day, that you sink into a pit of shame.
You're a failure.
And then you're a failure and you quit. So like those are very different. And so where we're like, what we're talking about today is actually like a very powerful place to operate from, where you have both, where you have an objective and you're not attached to the outcome in a way that it destroys you if and when it doesn't turn out exactly the way that you were committed to.
Like
and that's a challenge.
You'll live a life of shame if your identity is based on the outcomes. Like if your identity is attached to whether or not you achieve an outcome, like I think you'll be pretty miserable. So yeah, I just think there's a ton of power in operating out of like the space of who you are and what you want to be, and not be, and do it in a way where you look for results. Maybe you look for the goal, and that's not where the happiness comes from.
Yeah. So again, easier said than done. And
totally
something we definitely want to drive home today, and something for you to consider, is how to hold both of those. Identify who you want to be, what you want to accomplish, and detach from the outcome in a way that you can give yourself space and freedom to continue to pursue even when it doesn't go exactly the way you wanted it to.
Yeah. And I encourage our listener, like some of this may sound crazy and you're not piecing it all together yet. And just sat in that space. I'm looking at a statistic right now, and it says basically 80% of all New Year's resolutions fail. That's a huge number of goal setting and failures. And failure is necessary for success. I truly believe that. And I also think 80% is huge. And so if what we're doing as a society, as individuals, isn't working, I encourage you to be open to maybe a little different approach to it. And I think that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, right? Like if we're going to be leaders, it's going to be a little different. It's going to be taking a bold stand and helping people achieve what they want and realize that they're not failures when it doesn't go exactly the way that they had planned.
I mentioned a book before we started this podcast episode I really like. It's called Give Yourself the Gift of Done by John Acuff. If you're going to set goals this year, I'd highly recommend you read it first. It'll give you just a lot of tips and maybe a different view or understanding. And yeah, it's funny. I've had the book up just to be able to skim through and look at stuff as we've been going. And I'm on a page right now that says changing your goal here is not failure, it's success. I'd much rather you refine your goal or pick a better one than have you limp through a process that's difficult with a goal that doesn't matter to you. So I think that's okay too, to be in the middle of working towards a goal and realize, you know what? It's not going perfect, and that's okay. And I'm going to adjust the goal.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a failure.
Totally. And check this out. The other way is also true, because when you set a goal, it can actually become limiting, because look, let's say you set a goal and you go all in, you're committed, you're also detached, and you go. Who you are 6 months later is not the same person you were when you set the goal. And so that goal can become limiting to you. And so there really is something powerful about having this focus on who you're being, because that's really what's going to drive you where you want to go. And to Drew's point, like that goal could become it could be so big that it's just like demotivating at a certain point, or it could become almost limiting where it's like, oh, I hit my goal, but it's like, well, let's keep going. Let's keep climbing. Right. So
that book even talks about, and this is crazy too, that there are people who purposely don't finish the goal because they don't know, like they're afraid of what happens when they do and what comes next. Like that is fascinating to realize. And I think I've like self-sabotaged before in my own life where it's like I'm getting close to hitting something. It's like, well, this is going to create a new bar for myself or a new standard for me. And I think that's another reason, like being too attached to the actual goal can really be limiting or can be unhealthy.
Yeah.
If you're not
I
careful.
think you see that a lot in professional athletes,
Yeah.
you know, specifically people like Olympians and stuff, where it's such a defined moment in time, and like you're one shot, and you either do or you don't do it. And even if you win, it like people talk about how even after that big gold medal win, it's just like so unfulfilling,
Right.
because they have to sit in that space of, okay, now what do I do with my life?
Right. Now what?
Yeah.
I devoted my entire life to this one goal for maybe decades. And now what?
Yeah. Look, it's a lot to hold all together, right? And so here's the thing to do. Again, so we don't lose sight of like the tangible. Okay, how does this apply to me? Ask yourself what you want, not out of shame or comparison, but it's something you truly want. And then ask yourself, who would I be, or what kind of person would be doing that or would be achieving that? And write it down and look at that and recognize, okay, how do I be more of that? Like maybe it's how do I be more consistent? How do I be more present? How do I be more aware? And or whatever it is, whatever comes up for you. And then go and take action that's aligned with that to pursue the objective, recognizing that you're good if the objective doesn't happen exactly that way, and you're willing to adjust it because you're focused on who you're being, and that will continue to drive you when maybe you fail, and or maybe when you reach it earlier than expected, that will keep you climbing instead of getting stagnant.
Yeah, there's a quote by Hal Elrod. He's the writer of The Miracle Morning. He has a book called The Miracle Equation, and there's a quote he has that I love about goals. And he says the purpose of a goal is not to reach the goal. The purpose of a goal is to become the type of person who can achieve any goal by always giving it everything you have, regardless of the results. It's who you become through the process that matters more than actually reaching any one goal. And so like when I set a goal, I've loved that. That's really resonated for me. Like I worry more about that. Who am I becoming? And I think you can even be a person today. Like you don't have to wait till you get there, or you don't have to be 6 months into it to become that person. And if you are going to set a goal, set it with that intention. Set it with that intention that I'm more worried about what this helps me become than whether or not I get the $1 million in my bank account at the end of this year that I set the goal for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so good. And like, if your mind is a little bit blown right now, that's okay, right? Like we're literally saying the object of the goal is not to reach the goal.
Yeah.
And just try to grab onto that, because that's so powerful. And so we're not saying don't set goals. In fact, set objectives, like set goals, and do it through this lens of like you choose it, you want it, you're not attached to the outcome, and you're setting it because you're more interested in the climb than the destination. You're more interested in like climbing somewhere and continuing to improve and progress, because that's where all the joy comes from, than you are in actually hitting the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not to beat up the health example too much. It's such a good example.
Such an easy one to reference.
Yeah, I mean, because when you choose to be healthy, I mean, that could mean so many different things. And even like, say, within that, you set the goal of I want to get a 6-pack, but without the I want to live a healthy whole life, you can get a 6-pack by starving yourself to death.
That could be very
Is that
unhealthy.
really what you want?
Yeah.
Or do you want to be healthy, whole, active? You know, what's the bigger goal, or what's the bigger objective? Like, who are you? What are you striving for? And that's why I think it's so powerful to have, like Matt's using right now, objectives and who as people we want to be, what do we want, and set, if you want, goals within that as you transition through that. But make that vision so big that, it doesn't have to be just this year. This is how I'm going to live my life. And those little benchmarks can be along the way, and they can change infinitely to help achieve that bigger objective.
Well, what if we share some tips around goals? Is that all right, guys? And I'm going to just share, let's just steal this stuff from a book. So you guys, if you're our listener, go read this book if you want to break it down more. But this book from John Acuff, Give Yourself the Gift of Done. One, he talks about just don't focus on perfection, focus on completion or finishing. And I love this idea. He calls it the day after perfect. Like, so often, if you're focused on perfection, the day when things go wrong, people throw their hands up and give up on their diet. I missed my day at the gym. I had a goal to read from a good book every day, and I missed it. I forgot to take my progress photo on 75 hard, and you just give up on your goals because of whatever's going on. Another thing he talks about is just cutting your goal in half. So if you have a big goal, as you start moving towards it, cut it in half. And then if you get there, you can adjust it. Like to your point, Matt, sometimes if the goal's too small, you can get bigger. And then one of my favorites from this book is choose what to bomb. Sometimes we try to add so many goals into our life, and we think we're going to become some type of superhero doing all this stuff. And then we get into it and it's like, wow, this is really overwhelming. And I think sometimes to achieve something incredible in your life, you have to decide to give something up, and you have to decide you're not going to be good at some things, and that's okay. The example he gives in the book is maybe to be a better dad and spend more time with my kids, I'm not going to have the best looking lawn on the street. I'm not going to spend quite so many hours mowing and trimming, and except for us in Arizona, maybe we don't worry about that as much. But, and so I think what are if I really want to be good at this, what are some areas in my life I'm okay maybe allowing not to be perfect anymore? What are some areas of my life that, it's okay if I don't, I don't know. We could probably come up with 100 funny things that people feel like they should do or have to do to be a perfect father or mother or friend or worker. It's if you can just realize, hey, what are some, if I really want to have this in my life, what are some things I'm okay giving up? And I'm just going to bomb at. That's okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I think it brings some intentionality to, I think that touches on a good point, in that a lot of the times when we set goals, and I'm going to say goals specifically because it's like a target, we do it in a way that is just adding on top of everything else we're trying to already accomplish. And I think what you're saying, Drew, is, okay, we need to look at that and say, okay, if here's my whole bucket, are there things that I'm less prioritizing or have less emphasis on, and I'm okay if maybe they slip a little bit? Because the reality is we only have so much capacity to do so much in any given point in time. And I think when we can look at it from the light of, what things can slip, and I'm okay. And because some of this, we're talking in some cases, things that are ingrained in us from kids that we've never even thought about. Some people are so, what's the term? Planned out their day, that certain things have to happen at certain times and throughout the week and everything else. And they've never even really thought about man, what happens if I don't? I think that could be so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Give yourself grace and space and focus on what you want. So here's another.
Real quick. And I'm not saying don't do things. I'm saying choose what you're doing in a powerful, productive way.
Totally. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for the invitation, Drew, to for a practical tip. Here's something that I've tried to do the last several years, and I've found it to be really effective. So at the end of, because it's okay to also set goals at New Year's and use that time as a reset, right? That's awesome too. And you don't have to. we have started doing vision boards, which I found to be really cool. So my recommendation would be create a vision board, and it doesn't have to be in January. It could be right now. It could be later in the year. Create a vision board and let it be colorful and big and vague to some extent, right? Like have a picture of a yard, or a picture of spending time with your family, or a picture of, whatever it might be, and let it be big and colorful and less specific. And I don't know where this came from. I read it a couple years ago and it's been helpful. And then write your goals in pencil and your plans in pen. And that's like going back to where we started, right? That it's like put your goals in pencil, because those can become limiting, and they can also become like demotivating depending on what they are. Write your plans in pen. So let your vision be bright and colorful and big enough for you to grow into. And then write your plans in pen based on like, who would I be if I was obtaining these goals, and if I was living that vision? Who would I be? How would I be showing up? What would I be doing regularly? Write your plans in pen and your goals in pencil. And those three things have helped me kind of land somewhere that works for me, where there is a direction and I'm headed somewhere. And I also don't feel restricted, burnout, or, limited by the goals that I set.
Good stuff. So I've got a question. So I'd love your guys' thoughts on this. How does this all apply to leadership? Like how, if I'm a leader, maybe I've got a business this year, maybe I'm part of a group in my church. Like, how is a new year? How is a vision? How are goals? Like how is that part of leadership?
Yeah. Well, a big part of leadership is having a vision big enough for others people's vision to fit into, and being able to help support people and get what they want. And I really feel like the biggest underlying thing here is the leader's ability to hold both, meaning here's where we're headed, and I'm not attached to the outcome, meaning I'll continue to put you first as a person if our quarterly quota isn't met. I'll continue to see you as a person and not as a number, and use numbers powerfully in developing or in working towards our objectives. So to me, that's one of the biggest underlying things here as far as being a leader, is the ability to hold both the objective and detach from it at the same time.
I can honestly say to that, when I have left, I've been in sales a long time and often working for under somebody, sometimes in a independent contractor capacity, sometimes as a employee. And when I have left places, that's been the reason why, is I didn't see how my goals would fit into the goals of the organization. And what I can say, even though it wasn't fun to leave some of these places where I had great relationships with the people I was with, those leaders were still supportive of me. Like I still felt like they were a good leader, because even though my goals didn't fit within theirs, like they actually encouraged me to still pursue the goals I had for myself. Mm-hmm.
I think in almost every way, you can basically take the framework that we've talked about today as an individual, and goals and vision for a year, and literally apply it to any organization, family, business that you want. And in some ways it might change a little bit, because, creating some of this, you're involving other people, let's say within your family or within your business. But the principles are the same. When you create those visions, those, who are we? Who do we want to be as a group, a company? That lets you build out the framework underneath it much easier, and benchmarks and that type of thing. So I see it as you can almost plug and play exactly what we've talked about today as an individual to any organization.
Yeah, 100%. This is so good. So good. Thank you guys for your input and your perspective. And look, today's the day. Cast your vision, set your objectives, and detach from them, and go do the work to hold both of those and help others around you do the same. And lean into giving people space and grace, and yourself grace and space, and keep climbing.
Yeah.
Love what we discussed today. There's so many profound principles that apply. So we do hope all of you have an amazing new year, and that you're able to climb towards your objective and find the joy that comes only in the climbing.
Yeah. One last thought. I have to share it because it popped in my head, and I'll feel like I'll be doing our listener a disservice if I don't share it. If someone comes to you this year with a big goal, support it. I think the worst thing we can do for people when someone has a goal, tell them, "Oh, you can't do that," or "Are you sure that's too big?" Like, doesn't mean that sometimes people set goals that maybe are beyond themselves, and it's like, yeah, you can do that. What would you have to do, or how could I support you in that goal? Yeah, don't be the negative Nancy that that when someone tells you their goal, you shut it down. Like, that's not a leader. A leader doesn't do that. So encourage you to support not just your own goals, but the visions and dreams others have too.
Yeah. So go home, create your vision board or whatever you want to call it. Think specifically who you want to be, how you want to live your life, how you want to show up. And it probably won't happen overnight. It'll take weeks, months, possibly even years, but start. Matt said today's the day, and that's the call to action today is go home, start writing.
Yeah, fall in love with the process, fall in love with the climb. That's where all the joy is. The destination is never actually matters.
Happy New Year's, guys.
Thanks, guys.